Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I thought windsurf was a windsurfer. Mr. President Leonidas, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great, great pleasure to be here today. We're talking about technology. And technology has such a profound effect on human behavior. By the way, I'm making a break with my tradition today. I'm not using slides. I normally use slides with this very big and bold blue and white typeface, which looks a little bit like what Orte is using these days. So I'm breaking with that. I'm not using slides. I'm going to be talking only. I believe that Leonidas made a different break with tradition yesterday, and he used images only. So we've kind of like swapped positions there. Technology and its effect on human behavior, it's huge. It's huge. You know, when I think that my grandmother was born in a world where there were no aeroplanes, right? There were no telephones. She immigrated to South Africa by ship. There was no internet to check what the weather was going to be like when she got down there. There's nobody to call down there and find out if it's true that snakes bit people, right? That was not that long ago. And the effect is huge. And that's been true throughout the course of human history. Can you imagine when man first learned how to tame fire, how that affected human behavior? The goal of business is profit. I think we'd all accept that. But the business of business is social. So business has everything to do with human behavior. So as technology adapts human behavior and changes it, business is forced to adapt to a changing consumer. Okay? I'm going to give you a dramatic example in an industry which you'd probably think could not change much. Supermarkets. In Korea, Tesco has put up an experiment in a metro train station, which is a billboard with photographs from a supermarket shelf. And what happens is that a shopper simply walks by with his smartphone and picks up a QR code, gets on the train and goes to work, and when he gets home at night, the stuff is delivered. That is disruptive technology. It changes business models. It puts companies out of business. There's a quote from Steve Jobs, not from Steve Jobs, I always talk about Steve Jobs, forgive me, it's Bill Gates, the other guy. There's a quote from Bill Gates. He says, "We tend to overestimate the change that will take place in 2 years, and we underestimate what will happen in 10. And he adds to that, "Don't let yourself be lulled into inaction." There's another quote which I like very much from Warren Buffett. He said, "It's one thing to predict rain. It's quite another thing to build an ark." And I think that as technology changes, we have to build arks. There's the famous story in marketing of how the railroads went out of business because they defined themselves as being in the railroad business instead of being in the transportation business. And the aeroplane took over. They could very well have moved their technology from railroads to trains. If you look at the phenomenal growth, particularly of the mobile phone, I remember back in the early 90s, I walked around Mexico City with a huge brick in my hand, a big Motorola, and I thought that was really cool. You couldn't put it in your pocket. Your pockets weren't big enough, right? And I remember predictions on the growth of mobile phones throughout the 90s and into the years 2000. Where every year these predictions were revised upwards and upwards and upwards. And today there are more than 5 billion connections around the world, with a population of 7 billion. In many of the developed countries, Greece included, penetration is over 100%, which is a remarkable number. The Internet. We know today that the Internet reaches something like 2.5 billion people around the world. It's a huge number. But then that's given rise to something else. Remember what I said, technology shapes behavior. It's given rise to opportunities, like the opportunity it gave to a young kid called Mark Zuckerberg. If Facebook was a country, it would be the 3rd largest country on the planet, with 850 million users. Now, I'm not going to give you the kind of talk that you might expect from a guy like me about how social media is just about to replace traditional media and that television's got to be thrown away. I don't think that's going to happen. But what I know is happening is that the consumer has changed. Human behavior has changed. Human beings have become empowered. They have a voice. And when we talk with people today, we need to have a conversation. The consumer has changed forever. And that means that our job has changed forever. Let's talk a bit about branding. The American Marketing Association, which is the official body in the United States, defines the word brand as a name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or service as distinct from those of other sellers. That is absolute bullshit. Brand is reputation. Brand is what people think of you. And branding is managing what people think of you. And if you do a good job of managing impressions, then what you do is you strengthen your brand. Okay? Let's take the case of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is not necessarily the best soft drink in the world. It's certainly not the only soft drink in the world. Yet it is by far the largest soft drink in the world. Why? It's got the best brand in the world. It's been managed well, incredibly well. For more than 125 years, Coca-Cola is a 17-year-old kid that we all want to interact with. That's great branding. Great branding. Apple. Apple went from near bankruptcy back in 1997 to being the world's most valuable company. It all started with branding. By the way, it's a story I know rather well. I was part of the team that did the original rebranding when Steve Jobs went back to Apple in 1997. Branding, then, is reputation. Yes, branding, a part of branding is the logo, it is the slogan, it is the television campaign, but these are all things that affect what people think about you. Going to telecoms in Greece, the advertising is actually really great. I think my favorite spots on television today come from telecoms. I think, for example, of that incredible Tragic campaign, right? From Vodafone, which I think is really amazingly good. But it's one part of branding. That is not branding per se. I want to talk about a very different kind of challenge. And it's a challenge which a lot of the newer businessmen in the world are understanding very, very well. Tony Hsieh. Tony Hsieh is the guy behind an incredible e-commerce business in the States called Zappos. Zappos comes from the Spanish word zapatos, which means shoes. They sell shoes on the internet. Now, I don't know about you, but I normally try shoes on before I buy them. So the idea of selling shoes on the internet is quite a remarkable idea. Tony Hsieh has built his business on one simple principle. He understands that everything communicates. It's not about the ad campaign, it's not about the website, it's about everything. And in fact, Tony Hsieh says, every phone call that we make is a chance to build brand. And he's right. He's absolutely right. Look at Apple, by the way. Everything Apple does is fully consistent. A computer reminds you of an iPhone, which reminds you of an iPad, and when you walk into an Apple store, the whole thing comes to life. And there's a Genius bar at the back to help you to solve your issues. That's branding, and it's very good branding. And it all goes back to a line which we launched in 1997, which is think different. Apple does not sell computers. Apple sells this promise of always being ahead of the curve, of thinking differently, of providing strong consumer benefit. So every contact with the consumer is a chance to build a brand. I'm going to show you a quick video, and then I want to talk about it. Could I have the video, please?
I flew United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's old airport.